Today's daf, Be'ezus Hashem, is Masechta Menachos Daf Mem Zayim, number 47. And let's just review. We're going to begin discussing again the carbonos of the Shtei Halechem. Shtei Halechem was a group of carbonos brought on the Yontiv of Shavuos, along with baking two Chometz Diga breads. They brought two sheeps for a shlamim, shalmei tzibur, two sheeps, as you can see in the picture. And they would do a tenufa, lifting of the sheeps along with the breads on top of it. And then they would shech the sheep, and then they would separate the chaza and shaykh, the breast and the hind leg, and do another tenufa. Then they would bring the se'ir lachatas, and then they brought the oilas. There was one cow, two rams, 7 sheep for an oila. All this service was brought as a carbon oila. All this service was to be mater, the shtei halachem, which the shtei halachem, one of the breads was given to the kohen gadol, and the rest of the bread was distributed to the rest of the kahanim. Same thing with the kvasim. Was eaten by the kahanim that day and the night, and so also the se'ir lachatas. Normal oilers, normal chatas. This is just the unusual part of the service where you had two breads connected with two sheeps of the shlalmei tzibur. Now, Tan Rabbanim, starting from the top of the page. Kif seyat tzeres, the two sheeps on Shavuos, ein mekachenes alechem el b'shchita. The only time they make the breads holy, meaning that the breads were purchased from the money of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, the Kahanim are not allowed. The Kahanim are not allowed to take the money of the Beis Hamikdash and buy a sandwich with it. I mean, that's usher. It belongs to the tzibur. But once it becomes wholly part of the service, and then it becomes, then there's a permission for the Kahanim to eat it. So when can the Kahanim begin to eat the bread? Only after they slaughter the sheep. What happens? Ketzad says the Brisa. Ketzad, what happens? Shachtan lishmon. They shech the animals lishmon. Uzorak dam and lishmon, and they shechted and they sprinkled the blood lishmon. They did everything right for it. They shechted it as a shlamim, and they sprinkled the blood as a shlamim. Kadosh alechem. Then the bread becomes holy, and the kahanim can eat it. Shachtem shloy l'shman v'zraken dam shloy l'shman. Let's say they did the shchita both bad, and the zrika bad. Let's say they shechted it not as a shlamim of Shavuos, they shechted it as a regular shlamim. So they sprinkled the blood as a regular shlamim. The kayan forgot. So loy kadosh alechem. Then the bread is not holy. Here is where we'll find the machlokes. Shlochten shlishman, they shechted it lishman. So they did the shchita perfect for a shlamim on Shavuos, but zarak damim shlishman. But when he was sprinkling the blood, he sprinkled the blood shloi lishman, he shechted it like he sprinkled the blood as if it was a regular shlamim. So he did half good and half no good. So that's exactly what's going to happen over here. Alechem kodesh, ve'ena kodesh. It's holy, but not holy. What does that mean? Divrei Rebbe. Presumably, Rebbe means that it's holy bread, but the kohen can eat from that bread. Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon says, Lo lamena kodesh. It's never holy. Until you shecht lishman and sprinkle it lishman. So it's not holy bread at all. So the kohen can't eat it. So both Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon and Rebbe hold the kohen can't eat it. So what is going to be the difference between what Rebbe said and what Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon said? We're going to discuss that. And also, what does it mean? The bread's holy, not holy. So the Gemara says like this. First, the Gemara wants to understand, according to Rebbe, even the shchita alone can make the bread holy. My tama, the Rebbe. What is the reason of Rebbe? Because the pasuk says, "Veso ayil ta'al yasa zevach shlomo l'Hashem al sal hamatzos." So the ram by the El Nazir, which is similar to the Kifsi Atzeres, which they both had a shlomim that was Mekadesh breads or matzah. So now the pasuk says by the Nazir, the ram that you're going to make a shlomim, when you shecht it, yasa zevach, then it's for the sake of the matzahs, and the matzahs will become holy after you zevach the shlomim. So Lamemra, this comes to teach you the shchita mekacha, that shchita makes the breads holy. Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon says yasa means ya'ach yasa kolas yosef, until you do whatever is necessary to be done with the shlomim. So shlomim will not be mekadesh the matzah unless you yasa the shlomim. Yasa means you complete doing everything of the shlomim, which includes the zrika. If you do the shchita correct and you do the zrika correct, then I'll agree with you. Then it becomes holy. Rabbi Nami Oksiv Yasa, but Rabbi it also says Yasa. So why doesn't he learn that you need to do zrika correctly in order to make it holy? So the Gemara says Iksiv Zeva Yachse Kudakamrit. The pasuk would have said, "So Ayel Zevach Yasa." Do shchita and then complete it. Shlomim Lashem al sal matzos. Then the matzos become holy. Then I would agree with you, Kudakamrit, that you need to do the zrika lishma in order to make it holy. But now that the Torah tells you Yasa Zevach, the Me Yasa, the Torah is telling you what's going to make the breads holy. Bizvicha. Or what should you only do to make the breads holy is the shechting. So that is the machlokes on between Rebbe and Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon. Now the question is, Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon, Haksiv Yasa, Haksiv Zevach. It says the word zevach. Now the question is, according to Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon, if you need to do zrika, let the Torah just write Beso Ayel Yasa Shlomim Lashem Al Salamatzis, and then I'll know that you need to do both the shchita and the zrika. Why does this Torah single out shchita? And says the Gemara, I need the zricha to teach you Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, that the lechem has to be existing during the shechita, even though what's going to make the breads holy? The zrika, according to Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon. So let's say, if that's the case, then maybe you could bake the bread between the shechita and the zrika. So I would think that because if the zrika is the most important, so then the lechem could show up even after the shechita. So that's why the Torah tells you zevach, that the zevach has that the Torah tells you that the breads have to be in existence during the shechita. So now, okay, so we have back to the machlokes between Rebbe and Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon. Person shechted the animal lishman correctly, but zarag daman shloi lishon, and he sprinkled the blood shloi lishman incorrectly. So Rebbe said that lechem kodesh ain't a kodesh. And Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon says that it's holy and not holy, and Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon says it's also not holy till you do this zrika lishma. So the Gemara is going to first understand what did Rebbe mean? My kodesh, reina kodesh. It's holy and not holy. Obviously, the kohen can't eat it. It's not totally holy. It has a din of trumas halishkas stuff, and so the kohen can't eat it. So that's the same thing what Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon is saying. Abaya said kodesh ve'ena gomar. It's holy, but not completely holy. And Rava said that Rebbe meant kodesh ve'ena nitor. It's holy, but the kohen can't eat it. Now, if Abaya is saying it's holy, that Rebbe meant it's holy, but not completely holy, a kohen can't eat it either. So my benainu. So what's the difference between Abaya and Rava saying? Answers the Gemara, let's say, can I transfer the Kedusha onto money? Imagine the breads, and you have money right next to it. And they say the Shtei Alechem breads should be transferred over to the money. So Abaya says, Kodesh ve'einu komar, it's not completely holy. Therefore, Labaya loy tofes pidyonim. The money does not capture the Kedusha of the Shtei Alechem. And therefore, just by transferring the kedusha, let's say, onto money, you're just basically transferring kedusha of trumas alishka stuff onto trumas alishka, because really this bread still belongs to the bedek habayis, belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. It does not have a kedusha saguf. So therefore, with that money, allowed to buy any carbon sibur. It's not holy. It's not shtei alechem money. The Rava, according to Rava, it's holy enough that it's completely kaddish, and therefore the money will have the kedusha of the shtei halechem, only of the shtei halechem, and the breads will go to chulin, and that's it. So the breads will go to chulin. That would be the difference between understanding of what Rebbe said between Abaye and Rava. So the Gemara asks a question. Bishlam le Rava, I understand very well according to Rava. Hainu the Ika bein Rebbe Rab Lazar b'Shimon. Now we have a machlekes between Rebbe and Rab Lazar b'Shimon. According to Rab Lazar b'Shimon, you will say loy tafes pidyainai, and according to Rebbe, the way Rava's understanding of Rebbe is tafes pidyainai, that the pidyon would work. Ella Abaya, according to Abaya, that even Rebbe holds loy tafes pidyainai, my Ika bein Rebbe Rab Lazar b'Shimon. What's going to be the difference between Rebbe and Rab Lazar Shimon? Bottom line is, what's practically the difference between Rebbe and Rab Lazar Shimon? Rebbe is going to say it's half holy, and Rab Lazar Shimon say it's not holy at all. Both Rebbe and Rab Lazar Shimon both agree that you can't give it to the kohen to eat because the zrika was shloi l'shman. And says the Gemara, Ika b'nayel sula yaitse. Here would be the difference. According to Rebbe, as soon as you shecht it, some holiness goes on to these breads. Therefore, if you take the breads, now the breads are supposed to be in the Beis Hamikdash. If you remove the breads from the Beis Hamikdash, and then bring the breads back, and did zrika lishma, you did the zrika correctly. According to Rebbe, since during the time that it was holy, it went out of the Beis Hamikdash. So then the breads are puzzle. But according to the Blazer ben Shimon, since it never became holy at all until after Zrika Lishma, so even after Shchita, even if after you shecht it, it's not holy bread. So if it left the Beis Hamikdash and you brought it back in and then did Zrika Lishma, according to the Blazer ben Shimon, then the breads will be kosher. New Gemara. Boyamine Rab Shmuel Rab Yitzchak Rab Chia Bar Abba. Shmuel Bar Yitzchak asked a question from Rab Chia Bar Abba. Kif se Yatzaris, the sheep of the Yatzar, sheshachta l'shmam, uzrakan dam el shloi l'shma. You did the shchita l'shma and you sprinkled the blood shloi l'shma. Oh, that's the machlokes between Rebbe and so. Oisi alecha mahu b'achila. Can you eat those breads? Well, it's pretty obvious you can't eat those breads. So the Gemara says, Aliba Daman, what kind of question is this? If you're asking according to Rabbi Lazar Shimon, of course you can't eat the breads. Rabbi Lazar Shimon said, the Zrika makes it holy, and here you did the Zrika Shloi Lishman, so the breads are not holy. They cannot be eaten by the Kahanim. So Rabbi Lazar Shimon is out. Aliba the Rebbe, even according to Rebbe, Bein Labaya Bein Rava, Kodesh Vein and Nitaru. On the Abaye's understanding of Rebbe and Rava's understanding of Rebbe, they both don't they both agree that Rebbe never allowed the kohen to eat the breads because it's Kodesh Vein and Kodesh. So therefore, what kind of question is Kifsei Asaris that you shech the lishman, you zarg dam shleishman? How can you eat the breads? Certainly, according to Rabbi Lazar Shimon and according to Rebbe, whoever you understand Rebbe, like both hold that the breads are not permitted to eat. Ella says the Gemara Aliba Dahaini Hai tonight. The question of Rabbi Shimon ben Rabbi Yitzchak was based on another Tana. Tani Avu Rabbi Yomi Bar Abba. There's another Tana. The father of Rabbi Yirmiyah Amma taught us. Here's the following brisa: Shtei halechem, The two shtei alechem sheyatzu ben shchita l'zrika. This is the case that we discussed earlier. Shtei alechem, you shechted it lishma, and then it went out. V'zarek, and then you brought it back in. Okay, then you wait, and then it went out. Let's say it's shtei alechem, it's outside the base of English. You didn't bring it back in. Between the shchita and the zrika. V'zarek daman shel kavanas chitzon. Then you did the zrika with a pigel thought. Well, the shtei alechem became possible maybe when you brought it out. Can this pigel thought affect the shtei alechem so that if someone would eat that shtei alechem, he gets karas? But where was the pigel when the pigel thought was done? The shtei alechem was already possible because it went outside the base of Mikdash. Now, Reb Laza ain't belechem mishum pigel. The bread is not pigel because it's outside the base of Mikdash. Reb Kiva yesh belechem mishum pigel. Now, Amar Rav Sheshes explained, Hani Tanai Rebbe Svirle. They both hold like Rebbe. So as soon as you shechted the sheep and you did it right, the lechem became holy. Not completely holy, but let's say 50% holy. Then you went outside, you took the breads outside. So then the question is already the bread's apostle. Now you're going to have a pigel thought. How is that going to affect the breads? Rabbi Lezer says that's correct. Ein belechem shem pigel. And Rabbi Kiva is going to say yes. Now, everybody holds like Rabbi Shchita Mekach. The Shchita made the breads holy. Miu, Rabbi Lezer Tamei. Rabbi Lezer goes according to his reasoning. The Amma ein zrika me alas liyotzi. That zrika is not going to affect something that's not in the base of English. Rabbi Kiva Tamei. The Amma zrika me alas liyotzi. Rabbi Kiva is going to hold that zrika does affect something that's outside the base of English, and it'll affect even these breads who are 50% holy that are outside the base of English, so that if he did the zrika with a pigel thought, those breads have a din of pigel, like the meat itself, and because of that, therefore, if someone would eat those breads, he gets karas. Now we go to Amid Beis. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Where do we find this machlokes? Kachim emer and kachim kalam. A shlamim of a kachim kalam, right, is really belongs to the owner. When you shecht it and you did the zrika, you now the kachim kalam, the fats of that kachim kalam belong to Hashem. They have a kedusha zaguf, and you have to serve it up onto the mizbeach. But here we have an interesting machlokes. Eimurei kachim kalam sheyatzu lefnei zrikas damim. The fats of the kachim kalam that left the base of Mikdash before you did the zrika. So now, you shechted it correctly, and then the Amirim just walked out of the base of Mikdash, the fats, and then you did the zrika. What happens if you have a pigel thought by those zrika while this Amirim is outside the base of Mikdash? Your zrika doesn't affect them anymore. It doesn't turn it into kedusha seguf because it's outside the base of Mikdash. And even if you have a pigel thought by the zrika, the Amirim are not going to be pigel because they're outside the base of Mikdash. They become super holy, the kedusha seguf. The chayav and lemish and pigel, nicer tame. Your pigel thought will affect them, although they're outside the base of Mikdash. Now, so we see from there. So now we see a nice machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and Shimon. They both hold Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Elazar holds that they both hold like Rebbe, that once you shechted, the breads have become holy. The breads are holy. Question is, now that they're outside the base of Mikdash, now that they're outside the base of Mikdash, will a pigel thought affect it? That was the machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Kiva. Now let's get back to the question of Avua, the Rabbi Yirmiyah. That's right. He asked the question. Shmuel bar Yitzchak asked the question from Rabbi bar Abba. Let's say according to Rabbi Kiva says that a pigel thought could affect the breads that are outside the base of Mikdash. Mao. Midas rikas pigel, kalva lechem a pigel. According to Rabbi Kiva, sprinkling a pigel thought could affect the breads who are outside the base of Mikdash. Bepigel b'yotze kibasa, like the meat inside. Just like when you have a pigel thought, the kefsi at saris become pigel, it's also going to affect the breads that just walked out of the Beis Hamikdash between the Shechita and the Zrika. So, if that's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, Zrika Shloi Lishma, Nami, if you do a Zrika not for its sake, right? We did a just plain Zrika Shloi Lishma. Nami, Sharia Lelecha. Since it'll affect, so what you see over there that the breads always tack on whatever is going to happen to the meat is going to tack on to the breads itself. So just like the meat became pigel, the breads, even though it's located outside the Mishkan, outside the Beis Hamikdash, it's going to become pigel. So then say the same idea. When you're zorik a shlamim shloi lishma, right? The meat definitely becomes permitted to eat. That's the first Mishnah in Zvachim. It doesn't become puzzle when you zorik shloi lishma. You just have to redo your carbon, but the meat is permitted to eat. So since the zrika shloi lishma still has a positive effect on the meat, so then nami sharli it will make the breads permitted. Are you going to say the opposite? L'chumra aminin. They're going to say that l'chumra aminin, that only time you say the bread and the meat have the same din is if the meat is going to become pigel. So we're going to say that the breads are pigel even though they're located outside the Beis Hamikdash. But lakula layamrinu, we're not going to say that just because the meat is permitted, the breads are also permitted. So this was a unique case that if you hold like Rebbe, that the shechita makes the breads holy, and you hold like Rabbi Akiva, that the meat and the bread should follow along with each other. So zrika shloi lishma, which the meat is permitted, it's just you have to redo it, but the meat will be permitted. So therefore, the bread should be permitted. Or maybe we don't go that far. That was his question. So the Gemara is going to say, Maskif lo rapap umamai. How do you know the chisani abroi pligi? How do you know that when the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Lazar is when the Eimer Kachin Kalim was never returned back into the Beis Hamikdash, right? Maybe Dilma b'nisnaya bara, when it's completely outside the Beis Hamikdash, let's say the breads or the Eimerim, kuliyama like prigi, the Ein Zrika mayalas liyetzi. That Zrika does not affect whatever is outside the Beis Hamikdash. Ubahader alainu pligi, but if you bring it back in, that's the machlokes. The Reb Lezer sava la krebi, v'ama shchita mekacha. Reb Lezer holds like Rebbe, shchita makes it holy, and therefore v'ifsalei b'yaitze, and then became possible with yaitze, and that's why the people thought it's not going to affect it anymore because it already became possible. Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon, Rabbi Kiva holds like Rabbi Lazar Reb Shimon, not like Rebbe. It never became possible with Yaitse. So therefore, it had a kosher shchita. It went out. It was never holy. You brought it back in. You have a kosher zrika. That's why Rabbi Kiva says it could work. And if it could work, that's why you could passel it with a pigel thought. But the bottom line is, Rabbi Kiva, who says he holds like Rebbe? Maybe he holds like Rabbi Lazar but Rabbi Shimon. And if he holds like Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon, certainly if you did this Zrika Shloi Lishma, the bread's no good. You can't eat the bread. The bread never became holy. So the question is, how do you know for sure that Rabbi Akiva holds like Rebbe? Maybe Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Lazar but Rabbi Shimon. And it's a totally different machlokes. Whether you hold like Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon or you hold like Rebbe. So the Gemara says, certainly, Rabbi Akiva cannot hold like Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon because of another problem. Hi, Rai, I'm a Bishlam Rabbi Akiva, Rebbe Svirle. If you tell me that Rabbi Akiva holds like Rebbe, that right away when you shecht something, the shechita makes it holy, the breads are holy. Hainu the kama le Rabbi Akiva, the kachale b'shchita, it became holy with shchita. And the zrika will make it pigel because the breads became pigel. It became holy, and the zrika makes it pigel. Eli Amir Rab Loza, Rab Shimon Smirle, the Ama Zvika loy mekacha, Zvikas pigel mi mekacha. You're going to tell me the Zvika doesn't make it holy, right? So how are you going to make, how if the breads are not holy or the amorim are not holy, how could the pigel sprinkling make it holy? If the amorim, let's say, never became holy, right? You shechted, it means you shechted, and then it went out. The amorim are not holy. Now, how could a zrikas dam of pigel affect unholy amorim, right? Or unholy breads? Rav Gidl Amarav said, "Zrikas pigel einam avela de mila, einam moitzim de miila, einam avela a pigel sprinkling, einam avela de miila, the aimrain kachim kalim. It was aimrain kachim kalim that you shechted, and then you did a pigel. It's not going to work. The einam mitziyah de mila b'sar kachim." So again, it wouldn't stem with what Rav Gidl Amarav says if you say that Rabbi Akiva holds like Rab Lazar, Rab Shimon, and therefore your whole question is invalid. He is invalid. Rabbi Akiva must hold like Rabbi. So the Gemara says, "Lab itaisiv de Rav Gidl Amarav." This is Rav Gidl Amarav was refuted. If Rav Gidl Amarav was refuted, then Rabbi Akiva could hold like Rab Lazar Rab Shimon, and therefore your question is moot. In other words, your question, according to Rabbi Akiva, if you did zrika shloi lishman, shchita shloi lishman, shchita lishman, and zrika shloi lishman, you did the shchita normally, and the zrika shloi lishman, maybe if Rabbi Akiva could align himself with Rab Lazar Rab Shimon, you're not going to have any questions. Certainly, you can't eat the breads because they never became holy. Bottom line is, it's unresolved. His question is unresolved. Unresolved that he even has a question. That's the question. New Gemara. Let's just finish up over here. Boy Minei, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked a question from Rabbi Zera. Kifsi atzeres shachtan l'shma. The sheep of the atzeres, you shechted it normally. Va'avad halachem. And then you lost the bread. So now you don't have breads. You're up to the zrika. Maho, what should you do? Can you sprinkle the blood shloi lishman, and therefore the meat will be eaten? In other words, if you're going to sprinkle it as a kifsei atzeres, it's puzzle anyway, because once you lost the breads after the shechita, you have to throw the sheep. You have to throw the sheep in the garbage. You have to burn it, because it's puzzle. But so if you continue long as kifsei atzeres, so you're not going to be able to eat this carbon. So what should you do? Make a trick. Pretend the zrika was done shloi lishman. Do the zrika on purpose shloi lishman, so that it'll be a din like a regular shlomim, not a puzzle shlomim of atzeres. It'll be a regular shlomim, and you'll be able to eat the meat. Omalei. So that was a good question. So Reb Zera asked, how could there be such a thing of a carbon that if you did it right, it's possible, but if you did it wrong, it's kosher? So here is the same thing. If you did it right as kifsei atzeres, well, it's possible because it lost its bread. But if you're going to do it wrong, you're going to tell me that it's kosher? V'loi, says the Gemara, is that not true? We find that in other cases. But at Pesach, the carbon Pesach, koidim chatzai stein kosher l'shmai, the kosher shlo l'shmai, the carbon Pesach before chatzais, right? So it's not the time to bring the carbon Pesach. So if you bring it as l'shem Pesach before midday, so then it's not kosher. But if you do it as a shlamim, it's kosher. So we see that if you do it right, it's possible. If you do it wrong, it's kosher. So what's your question? Hachi kaminas. Reb Zeres explained. It still doesn't make sense. And do you find a carbon that at one time could have been used and done right, and now it was pushed away from being done right. Now you're going to do it wrong, and it's going to be kosher. You see, Pesach Kodim Chatzos was never a carbon Pesach in the first place. Says the Gemara of Eloy, I'll give you another case. Right? Pesach Achach Zamani B'Shari Ma'aseh. Let's say Pesach, carbon Pesach, that you potentially could have brought it on Yud Dalet, and you didn't. The animal was never brought on Yud Dalet. So later on, you could bring it as a shlamim. So if you bring it as a Pesach, it's going to be invalid. But if you think shlamim, it's going to be, you're allowed to eat it. So at one time, you could have brought it as a shlamim. So same thing over here. You could have brought this as a kifsei etzeres. Now you can make it. You could make it. The question is, you could turn it into a regular shlamim because you lost the breads. So the Gemara says, "Hachi kamin." This is what I meant to say. Rabbi Zeir says it's still not a good question. Is there a possibility that a carbon that was good and you shechted it for its own sake, and then you can't do it anymore? Now you can't sprinkle it lishmai, but it's going to be kosher shlai lishmai. Because let's say by the carbon pesach, if you shecht it, you never have a carbon that you can shecht it and it with the what it's supposed to be shechted for, and now you can't sprinkle it for what it's supposed to be sprinkled for, and now it's going to be kosher if you sprinkle it l'shem something else. That you don't find, because the carbon pesach after zmanai cannot be shechted for a carbon pesach anymore. Here, this kifsei etzeres, when you shechted it, it was a kifsei etzeres. Now, somehow a bear came and ate the breads, or was lost. So now the kifsei etzeres should be possible. So you want to do a trick to make it kosher by sprinkling it as a regular keves. Where would you find such a case? Says the Gemara Barei Toida. This we find by Toida. Man shechted a Toida with the breads. Here's a Toida. We had this before. The guy has a Zevach Toida and the breads. He shechted the carbon Toida. The breads somehow got eaten and lost. What should you do with the carbon Toida? You continue on sprinkling as if it's a shlamim. So you shecht it as a Toida and you're turning it into a shlamim. So you see, does that works? So the Gemara says that would work by Toida. Shani Toida, the Rachmana Karye Shlamim. The Torah called a Toida a Toida a Shlamim. The Torah called a Toida a Shlamim. But so therefore, a Toida in essence could be a Shlamim even without the breads. But here, this kifsei atzeres was intentionally brought with the two breads. They never separated. Torah never separated it, as it keeps calling it shlamim of the shtei halechem. So therefore, if you lose the shtei halechem, you can't really do a trick and turn it into a regular shlamim. So that was the question, and then remains unresolved. Maybe you could, maybe you can't, and so ends Daf Mem Zayin.